Hey now! What is up, everybody? My name is Mike Brown, aka Review King MB, and we are back talking about Smallville. This is episode 2 of season 1 entitled Metamorphosis. And rewatching this episode, I am quite surprised that this episode is so early in the show's existence. The fact that maybe they were confident enough in the show that they didn't mind putting out an episode that is so heavily focused on the meteor freak of the week. First, I want to mention that it's the first episode to feature a previously on Smallville, which it's the second episode, so of course it would be the first, right? The first episode's not going to have that, but I'm more so bringing it up because I don't remember Smallville in general doing previously on. Maybe I'll rewatch it and I'll be like, oh no, they actually did this quite a few times, but yeah, we got a previously on where they recapped the pilot, so that makes sense for anybody who may have missed the pilots. And like I say, we start with actually the ending of the last episode where Clark is watching Lana arrive home from the dance, right? And as she goes to her room, there is somebody in the trees watching her and left like a box there, and a bunch of butterflies come out, and Lana's like reacting to them. She's not weirded out over how the hell did these bugs get into her room. She seems kind of cool with it. And this bug boy, who is named Greg, you see him, he goes home after, and his mom is giving him crap because she found his stash of Lana tapes. He's been stalking and lurking and watching Lana from afar, recording videos of her, which God only knows what he's doing with these videos. And it's so funny with this actor playing Greg, Bug Boy, because I've seen him in a few other things. Mostly, like, I remember Final Destination, the first one. I think he was also in Saw 5. But he's a decent enough actor. When you see him at the beginning, though, and he's covered with pimples and covered with, like, weird stuff on his face and the glasses, it's like, man, they're kind of hitting it over the head with how goofy and creepy this guy is supposed to look. I thought he did as good of a job as I think you're going to do with a character written this way. His mom is talking about how she's going to call the military school first thing Monday, so he decides he has to move and hide his bugs, because who's going to take care of his bugs? And then as he's driving with all of them, it's comical how many jars of bugs are in the backseat of his car and even next to him. And then one of the jars falls, and the bugs just start going everywhere, causes him to crash his car, and then the bugs engulf him, like overtake him, and he's screaming, and I guess this is the evil version of Spider-Man. Now, I'm not talking about black suit Spider-Man. I'm talking about if Peter Parker was a weird, creepy stalker kid, which, if you rewatch that first Tobey Maguire movie and the way how he was watching Mary Jane from his window next door, shit, maybe they do have a lot more in common than I realized. Funny enough, though, this episode came out like a year before that first Spider-Man movie came out, so the parallels are quite interesting. And then we get the first ever opening credits. And there's something about this particular opening credits, right? The way it's shot, the way it's put together, the way how it shows all of the actors. I think opening credits are something that it's a little missed when it comes to TV shows nowadays. I mean, maybe there are still some shows that do it, but done in this way where it helped me, I think, remember actors' names and sort of keep track of the actors who are on the opening credits. Like, oh, they're the main cast, right? And the song. Obviously, the song by Remy Zero, Somebody Save Me. Could you get more iconic than this? It's something that thankfully they've kept the entire run of the 10 seasons. They never changed the song. How could you change the song? Yes, it's very much of the time, this song. All right, it's a little cheesy, but I love it. I do. This took me years to get out of my head, and now I am rewatching the show, and I'm going to have it back into my head. So that's always good. And then we get something very interesting. And it's something that I always remembered, but it's even more fascinating rewatching it. Of Clark, or I guess we don't know who it is yet. We see somebody point of view, POV, of them flying through Smallville, which is cool. And surprisingly, like I don't even really know how they pulled this off because it doesn't look CGI, but they're flying over the town, and then they go inside of a window, which is ironically Lana's window. We were just here, and now we're back here. Another boy is stalking her, I guess, and it's Clark, and he comes and floats over her bed, which I know, a little creepy. Watching her sleep, she opens her eyes and says, "It's all your fault, Clark," and then closes them again. Very creepy. But it's a dream. And when Clark wakes up, he wakes up floating over his own bed, and then he falls and breaks his bed. And it's wild that in only the second episode, they already tease the idea of Clark flying, or Clark having the ability to at least float or levitate or glide or whatever. They never really touch upon this at all until, like, what, season 10? It's wild that they had this idea this early on, and we never got a true payoff to it. There are moments later throughout the series where Clark is able to like jump high and far, but never fly until seemingly the finale. And you see that the new Greg, right? When I say new Greg, new Bug Boy, he's no longer wearing glasses. He no longer has pimples all over his face. He's quite cleaned up. He's dressed better. He goes up to Lana at some like fair thing, and he's blatantly like hitting on her. You could tell new confidence, new. And she mentions that he's not wearing glasses, so she almost didn't recognize him. But I was waiting for her to be a little more like, "You look really different," because he does look really different. His hair is different. His face, I'm surprised not more people were going like, "What did you do to yourself that you don't look as weird as you did before?" And Greg asks Lana about helping him with his paper, and she kind of says yes. He tries to say, "Let's go to my house." At least she's smart enough to say, how about the library, dude? Don't be a freaking creep. And of course he follows that up with, "It's a date." Like, what? And then Whitney shows up and sort of tells him to F off. And once again, Whitney's right. Yeah, you see some dude being creepy, talking to your girl. He was actually nicer than he probably should have been. There was a funny interaction with Whitney and Clark, because Lana asked Clark where was he. He wasn't at the dance. Clark says that he was a little tied up, looks over at Whitney, and then Whitney talks to Clark on the side and says that, like, "Hey, it was just a prank, it's all good, right?" And then he asks for the necklace back. And I actually like that Clark is not a pushover. Clark is not somebody who is like afraid of Whitney or cowers to Whitney. He basically says, "Oh yeah, well, I don't have the necklace. So if you want it so goddamn bad, go look in the field and find it your damn self." Of course, he didn't say "damn." I don't think Clark Kent would ever swear like that. But you know what I'm saying. He showed some guts, some chutzpah, some backbone. And then Lex kind of sees all of this go on. Lex is also there. And I like Lex trying to befriend Clark. I mean, you could argue that he's trying a little too hard. But I just like the fact that he sees what's going on. He sees Clark looking at Lana. He sees Lana with Whitney. He knows that Whitney was involved with the Scarecrow thing. So I like that Lex observes everything, kind of figures out what's going on, and then even on his own manipulates the situation in order to try to make some stuff happen, because Clark won't do it on his own. There is a moment where Greg attacks Whitney. Whitney's driving back on the road, and Greg jumps onto the roof of his truck, knocks the truck over. A fire's about to start. Luckily, the Kents are driving up, and Clark instinctively saves Whitney. Once again, I like that Clark doesn't think about it, doesn't hesitate, doesn't sit there and go, huh, should I do this? I don't really like Whitney. Whitney's the boyfriend of the girl that I like. There's none of that. He just immediately saves him. I love the effect of Clark taking shield of Whitney as the fire burns behind them. Even when Jonathan Kent runs up to touch Clark, and then he's literally burning. His clothes are burnt. Like, that was cool. Very, very cool. Another situation of Clark just doing something without actually knowing if he was going to protect him. He just kind of did it, and luckily it worked out. And Lex goes to see Lana at her horse ranch there, because, of course, Lex, the Luthors, are in business with Lana's aunt. And I like this meeting because Lex genuinely doesn't remember ever meeting Lana before, and Lana did meet him when she was 10, caught him with skinny dipping with some other girl, and so that left an impression on her of what kind of guy Lex is, and it embarrassed Lex a little bit. I've seen some people talk about this interaction in particular of Lex and Lana, saying that, is Lex attracted to Lana, right? And I know at this point, I think Lex is like 5 years older than them. So he's about 22, 23-ish, somewhere around there, right? I think that's how math works. And so Lana being 14 or 15, actually, no, he would be 20 or 21. I don't know exactly how old Lana is supposed to be or how old Lex is supposed to be, but Lex is over 20. And you can argue that maybe he's acting a little too flirtatious, or he's commenting to Clark that you have good taste in women. Like, maybe he is showing that Lana's is attracted or attractive to him. But I do like that when he's alone with Lana, he's not like hitting on her. He's actually going to bat for Clark. He's saying a bunch of things that, like, maybe you should be with Clark because Clark is the guy that saves people, where he basically tells Lana that Whitney's the one that pulled this prank on Clark. And I like that. It's a thing that, yes, is Lex kind of going behind Clark's back and doing things that Clark wouldn't want him to do? Sure. But does he have good intentions? Is Lex doing this with the intent of helping Clark? And the answer is yes. So I appreciate that. I think these are the qualities that we see in Lex early on, before he's a full-fledged villain, that makes us like him and makes us want him and Clark to actually be friends. And Lex ends up giving Clark the necklace, the kryptonite necklace. Now, I had forgotten what was going to happen with Lex finding the kryptonite necklace. I didn't know if he was going to keep it, or I didn't know if he was going to maybe figure out what that meteor rock is. But no, he gives it to Clark because he says, hey, this necklace means something to Lana. You can give it to her and tell her what happened and basically F over Whitney, and you have all the power. Like, again, it makes sense that this is Lex's mentality, that this is the way Lex views a possible romantic situation like this. And clearly this is not the way Clark would go about things. I did find it curious that when Lex opens up the lead box that has the necklace, and Clark immediately starts getting sick or starts having a weird reaction to it, and Lex kind of notices, right? Like, he asks Clark, are you feeling okay? But there's no follow-up to it. Like, I would be like, what the hell is going on, dude? Like, is it this necklace? Because I close it and you're fine. It's weird that, like, unless Lex is just keeping that to himself, it seems like he would have, I don't know, noticed that a little more. So Clark does take it. He does go back to the barn. And guess who's in the barn? Lana. Lana is visiting him in the barn. She's looking at his telescope, which I like that made Clark nervous, because Lana even mentions that, you can see my house from here. Clark was like, really? Moves the telescope a little bit. And I like that even he points out that, like, they've lived this close to each other. So they do live close to each other. And she's never visited him before. And she talks about how, like, hey, she figured out what Whitney did. She wants to apologize for it. She wants to sort of not defend Whitney, but more so like talk up Clark and say like how great he is. I like that. I like that Lana was coming from a place of like almost recognizing how great of a guy Clark is. And Clark did have the moment to give her the necklace right then and there. He doesn't do it for whatever reason. I think he just thinks the way Lex wanted him to do it is a little skeevy. And then you see a scene where Clark is with Jonathan in the barn later on, and Greg shows up. Greg is like in the shadows, in like the rafters of the barn, jumps out to attack Clark, and then tries to attack the father, Jonathan. Jonathan falls off, and I love this. Some of this early stuff, I can tell, like I can almost imagine myself being younger, being like a teenager, or however old I was when I was watching this. And they do our first time seeing super speed. And when I say super speed, I'm talking about Clark going in normal motion with everything else around him going in slow motion. And I just know that was one of the things that got me hooked on this show as far as how cool that looked for the time, right? You jump ahead to now, and yeah, we've seen plenty of things, even on TV shows, that might look better, but I still think for 2001, this looks really cool. And Clark running over to save his father, he actually gets in front of his father before he lands on that farming equipment that would have killed him otherwise. And then Bug Boy bounces. I don't know why they didn't call the cops. I mean, maybe it's just because the Kents are weary on cops hovering around Clark for too often, asking too many questions, especially with that damaged equipment. They might be like, how did that happen? Oh, we gotta lie about that. So they don't do it. Now, Clark goes to Chloe for help. This is actually one of the few times Chloe is in the episode. She only has 2 scenes. This one scene where Clark is talking to her and he explains everything that's going on with the Greg kid, and so she looks into it, and then they go to Greg's house, and it's Clark, Chloe, and Pete. The only scene with Pete Ross. And you see them go in there, and the house is dirty, and his room, Greg's room, is covered in webbing that looks like it's straight out of Party City. I couldn't help but think that, like, yeah, maybe they could have done a little better trying to make that web look more real. And they find the videos of Lana, and I think we should be a lot more concerned about that, because how long has he been doing this? It's just, yeah, it's just very, very creepy. And then they find the mother's dead body. Greg killed the mother. There was a scene where I couldn't tell if he was naked. He clearly, I think, took a shower. Yeah, because there was a scene where Greg took a shower and his skin was peeling off, which looked pretty gross and looked pretty good for effects. And then his mom's freaking out, and she finds his room, and then he comes in, and once again, I think he's naked. I don't know, weird. And he basically says he's going to kill her. And so you see the aftermath of, yes, he in fact killed his mom. And Greg then goes to kidnap Lana. He knocks out Whitney, throws him across the freaking room. It's amazing that, like, Whitney does mention that he threw him like he was nothing, but there's not more emphasis of, like, does he have super strength, or is he... I mean, maybe that's more questions that come later when more and more superpowered media freak kids start showing up. Maybe they don't really know what to make of it this early on. And I don't know what Greg did to Lana. Did he just web her up? Because she was looking peaceful, covered in the web, right? And like she looked like she was Sleeping Beauty, just laying there when Clark finds her, and Greg is just watching over, and the two of them have a quick fight. They wind up at some like old mill factory like place. And this is something that I wish either this was a 2-parter, or I wish they brought Greg back way sooner in a second part to develop more of the backstory, because they do mention that Greg and Clark were friends when they were younger. They did hang out a lot, so Clark knew a lot about him and his mother, and just like certain things that even during this fight at the factory where Greg was talking about, oh, you still haven't changed, Clark. You still get sick whenever we're at this place because there's kryptonite laced around the factory. And just the fact that they knew each other years ago, I don't know. I wish we could have dealt more with that or dived into that, or maybe like how close of friends were they? How much of the friendship could maybe be played into Clark wanting to save him, or Clark trying to feel like there's a nicer dude somewhere in there. It is a little rushed. It does kind of feel like it goes by kind of quick. I feel like a lot of this stuff, it's more important probably in the long run for Clark to put together the kryptonite effects on him. He even did with the necklace when he was looking at the necklace and he saw what it did to his hand and the discoloring and the green veins, right? And while he was in the factory, the same thing happened. But then when he hid behind a lead wall, he healed and he was fine. So I think it's more about Clark figuring out his weakness to kryptonite, his defense against kryptonite. You get some shoddy shots of Greg jumping like a spider, bouncing around, but it looks kind of bad. Uh, it did. It looked pretty silly. And then Clark throws Greg across the factory, and Greg hits a part of it and grabs onto something that, like a lever or something, and this giant crane crushes him, or at least it looks like it crushes him, and kills him. At least, again, you think it killed him. There was many years where I thought this character was dead, because what else are we supposed to think? A bunch of bugs go running away, seemingly coming out of his body? It's not addressed. They don't mention that Greg's dead. They don't mention anything. Clark just leaves. And I guess he went to go check on Lana, but Whitney had already saved Lana. Whitney looks like the big hero. So there goes that potential breakup of Whitney and Lana. There was a scene earlier I didn't mention where Lana confronts Whitney about the prank and about the necklace, and she sort of figures everything out. She's pissed at Whitney. But I think all ends well. You do get a scene of Clark returning the necklace to Lana's doorstep, but he quickly runs off before she could see it's him. Clark, a better man than me, I would have absolutely taken all the credit. Call me a piece of shit, but I would have been like, hey girl, look what I got. Again, Clark, better person than me. He just let her get it. A lot of 2000s pop and rock songs playing. I know this is the time period it's taking place in, but like for the second episode, just a lot of like alternative music that I just was like, man, this definitely takes me back to a time. Anyways, guys, I think it's a solid episode. It's not a great episode. It's nowhere near as good as the pilot, and I'm sure it only gets better from here, but I also don't think it's bad. I think there are some good stuff in here. There's some interesting stuff in here. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of episode 2, Metamorphosis? What do you think of Bug Boy? Is he one of the worst meta freaks that they've had? I'm sure, once again, we'll see worse. I should also mention this might be the first time Clark saves Lana. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later.